All right, hello everybody. Welcome to this December 15th meeting of Somerville's Urban Forestry Committee. Pursuant to Chapter 107 of the Acts of 2022, we're holding this meeting remotely. We will at some point get guidance on whether or not we're allowed to do that permanently or what the long-term plan is, but for the moment we're all comfortably in our homes. We are making audio and video recordings of the meeting. Those will be posted along with minutes on the city's website as soon as practical after the meeting. What we usually do here is go ahead and promote attendees to panelists so that you can see each other and see who's in the meeting. It is at your option to turn on your camera. You do not have to. You're welcome to. It is at your option to go ahead and participate in the meeting. Again, that's absolutely not required, but we try to be as welcoming as we can here. So I am going to start us off with some introductions of the committee members who are here, and while people are talking, I will promote attendees to panelists. You'll be able to see everybody in the GoToWebinar interface. So as I mentioned, I think I'm Chris Dwan. I'm a local activist. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Urban Forestry Committee. I'm committed to expanding our urban canopy in a sustainable and environmentally sensible way. Amy Myrtle, if I could ask you to introduce yourself, please.
Amy's having trouble connecting to audio, so.
All right.
I'm back.
Then Breck Miller, you are alphabetically by first name next on my list.
Hi everybody, my name is Breck Miller. I'm the city tree warden. I handle most of our tree maintenance for city street trees.
All right, then Jennifer Clifford.
Hi everybody, I am Jennifer. I'm a resident of Somerville and serve on the Urban Forestry Committee. I'm a plant pathologist by training, and I'm interested in a healthy, broad urban canopy. And I'm also interested in engaging the community to see our goals of having the best urban forest that we can in our city. Thank you.
All right, next up is Leigh Grossman.
Hey everyone, my name is Leigh Grossman. I'm a landscape architect working in Boston, living in Somerville. And I'm also excited about getting the public engaged with our urban trees and urban species. And really getting into finding the species that work best in our city and studying them and getting excited about them and talking about them. So excited to be here.
Thank you. Next up is Tori Antonino. You are muted, my friend.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tori Antonino. I'm a co-chair of the Urban Forestry Committee. I guess I'm working to assist humanity and the planet in the age of the Anthropocene. Gotten ourselves in a lot of trouble by focusing on humans as being the #1 species. So I'm here to help the insects who run the world to not have an Armageddon, basically. So we're just trying to help other creatures survive. That's what I do, plant native plants, use ecological practices, and the city is starting to do that as well. Very proud of us. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Vanessa Bukili.
Hey everyone, I'm Vanessa. I'm the Senior Urban Forestry and Landscape Planner for the city. Anthropocene is one of my favorite words. Nice one, Tori. I am interested in making the canopy of the city as big and beautiful as possible. So I'm really interested in everything related to trees and tree-related planties. That's it.
All right, I'm skimming back through to see if Murphy, you have joined us. If you're able to connect to audio, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Murphy Langevin. I am a senior at Essex Tech in arboriculture, and my goal is to help Somerville get youth involvement in the urban forestry program.
Thank you. I'm glad that you're here. All right, so I don't think that I missed anybody unless Amy Myrtle is able to speak now. Still challenges with audio. Cool. All right, I will now throw it open if anybody who is not a committee member wants to introduce yourself and share what brings you this evening. You are welcome to. It's not a requirement, as I say, but you are welcome to introduce yourself.
Well, I'll introduce myself. My name is Stephen Clark, 19 Ivolou Street, 30-year resident of Somerville. I follow this committee's work primarily through Chris's Twitter. And we had some tree pruning done this week that you may have heard about. And I just wanted to, it was very distressing to get Chris's, tweet and to see the results of the pruning, and wanted to get the committee's advice on what we could do to do better in the future. And
all right, yeah, we can totally take that as a resident concern. Would anybody else like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Anne Ryan.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I am a resident of Cobble Hill and am immediately concerned about what's going to happen with the green space at Cobble Hill, and have a long-term interest in the green spaces in urban environments.
And for me, is the Cobble Hill green space the one that's impacted by 90 Washington?
Correct.
All right, cool. We can talk a bit about that. Other
Oh,
introductions.
excuse me. I have to leave at 5:30, regrettably.
All right, we will do all of the resident concerns up at the front part of the meeting. Anybody else would like to introduce yourselves? Go ahead, Crystal.
Hey folks, I'm Crystal Huff, they, them pronouns, and I am a longtime listener, longtime caller.
Welcome. Anybody else who would like to introduce yourselves? All right, no pressure. So let's start off, since I realized that I skipped housekeeping. Do we have any housekeeping?
I'm taking minutes.
Perfect. Go ahead, Tori.
Yeah, would an update on candidates to serve on the Urban Forestry Committee be housekeeping, or would that be under city updates?
Let's put that under city updates. Cool, so let's talk, if we could, since the second item on the agenda here is resident concerns. The tree pruning on Ivolou was an instance, the usual thing where the chainsaws roar and the chipper goes. There are a row of trees on private property, the row of condominiums and apartments that's on the portion of Ivolou that goes into Park Street. Crew came through and did a really very vigorous job of backing those trees off to an almost espalier two-dimensional status between the power lines and the buildings. And I think the neighborhood was surprised. I don't think anything illegal was done because the trees are technically still alive, but this is a case where we didn't have any heads up, and I suspect it was the condominium association just came through and did this thing. So Steve and Clark, does that align with what?
Steve is fine. I can give the background on that.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, we're the 18 residential unit, 20,000 square feet of office space that runs on the north side of Ivolou from Park to Harrison. And we have 13 trees, and we had, which were, touching the building, and, I think just needed, needed pruning for their health as well. We got 2 quotes from Bartlett and Barrett tree companies Bartlett was recommended by our landscaper, and I know that landscaper, so you quote about landscapers as well. And although I believe our landscaper is a conscientious horticulturalist in general, and we got so chose to go with Bartlett, and they came in, and so the first I'm not I don't know very much about proper tree pruning or horticulture in general, and so was distressed both by what I saw when I got home and by Chris's comments about pruning these to the point of of killing them. So this may or may not be the place to do it, but I'd like maybe to share the scope of work that we got from the pruning company, and find out what there was perhaps a red flag, and what if there are some guidelines about how to how we can go about making a good choice of a contractor to come in and do this kind of work. I mean, I hope I agree. It seems like there's we'll see what happens come spring. I wish I had thought to take before and after pictures so that we could show them what, but there was a lot of material removed, and I share Chris's concern about their long-term viability. So I don't know if there are guidelines, if there are if there is a place we can go to get this kind of work vetted prior to contracting it. We obviously want our plants to be healthy, and we want to be good citizens as well.
Right. So question to the rest of the committee, how deep do we want to go? I know we want to be careful about recommending specific vendors for anything from our seat as the city committee, but what resources would residents and condo associations have to make sure they know what they're getting into? Is there any? I honestly don't know the answer to that.
I mean, it's an interesting case because I actually think of Bartlett as being, a pretty reputable company. They're obviously, they're actually international, so they're all over the country, and some offices are better than others, but they generally, in my experience, do pretty good work. But with that said, I mean, I think for anybody hiring an arborist, the key is to make sure that you and the arborist understand each other very clearly in terms of what the scope of the work is and what the expectations and the goals are, but also looking at things like, are they accredited? I can think of at least one local company that's Tree Care Industry Association accredited, which is a relatively rare thing and a pretty good indicator that it's a good company that follows best practices. Companies that are using exclusively ISA certified arborists, like there are organizations out there that do accredit or certify this kind of work. So I think being sure to look into the qualifications of these companies beforehand is key. Obviously in this case, I think Bartlett, excuse me, I keep saying Barrett, but Bartlett I think ticks both of those boxes. So it's, like I said, it's interesting to hear that they did what sounds like a hack job, but unfortunately that's kind of the best answer that I have.
And again, I don't feel qualified to say whether it was a hack job or not. I mean, it looked severe.
It may be, and it sounds like a case. I think you mentioned there were utility lines that may have been part of the equation there. So, it could be a situation like whenever we do utility pruning in the city, it often looks terrible when it's first done. And sometimes it is, but sometimes it's mostly aesthetic, and really by doing something that's fairly aggressive, you can avoid something that's even more aggressive in the future. So, you know, if you're able to, even if it is ugly and more than you'd like to take off, it may be that by doing so, they were able to, you know, prevent removing much larger branches that would have been interfering with the utility lines in the future. I obviously have no context here and haven't seen the pictures, but
well, yeah, one of the goals was to provide light to the understory, and we do have a number of shrubs, so you know that may have factored into it. It just seemed like they kept going, you know, kind of like trying to fix the haircut by taking off a little more off one side or the other, and it's so I understand its judgment, and it's trying to balance competing goals. But if somebody was willing to, or could put me in touch with somebody who could put together some goals for or some ways to evaluate the the kind of quotes we get, I would be more than happy to work on that, and maybe that would help other people too.
Other thoughts from the
part, because each case is special, each case is unique, I'm sure.
Yeah, I can't think of a specific thing to direct you or any other folks to, but when I am working towards having a tree pruned for a city project, I like to walk the actual site with the arborist or company that is going to be doing the work and talk about the specific branches or work that needs to be done. So maybe the quotes you got were one step, but then there's another step where you actually meet on site and make sure that you understand what they're thinking of removing, and you can sort of visualize it that way. I don't know if this was part of your steps here, but maybe then it can be identified, like if you really want to open up the understory and you have to remove these big branches, then you can see what the outcome will be before it's actually done and too late. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yeah. And one of our owners did that, someone who knows more about horticulture than I do. But again, once they get started, it's, so anyway, I also just kind of want to apologize. And, Chris said, why does he bother? Well, I mean, people care. People, we really do care. And so.
No, I appreciate that. And then Crystal actually shared a comment here in the chat that there's a master urban gardener class that includes examples of good pruning work and bad pruning work.
Thanks for calling. Bye-bye.
Sorry?
Yeah, I would. I'm not seeing that link in the chat, but I would be, very interested to look that up.
Jennifer Clifford, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you. Just a quick follow-up, Vanessa, question about when you do the site visit. I know you've said you've done that in the past. Would it be common practice to get a written description of the work to be done, so that then, Steve could read that and say, okay, now I have an understanding of what's to be done? Because I do know that in the past we've talked with some other folks. Maybe I've got a two-part sort of thing here, but also we've talked with others about getting trees pruned. And I think when large trees get pruned, it can be very striking. As Breck pointed out, it can look dramatic because you aren't accustomed to seeing them that way. But it sounds like they're large. If there were power lines involved, I think my understanding of it is that larger trees can withstand a pretty good amount of pruning. So would it be wise to see what happens in the spring, make sure things seem okay, that they're not dying back? But should people get a written description, sort of like walking a property, getting a written description of the work to be done and making sure that is adhered to? Is that a step that homeowners and condo associations can take to ensure that everybody's on the same page?
Yeah, that is something that we get. Usually we'll like do a walkthrough sort of to get a sense of the scope of work, and then have that company write out like the actual details, maybe not, you know, this exact branch, but sort of a general goals, you know, 1 to 2 sentence explanation of the plan, and then that is accompanied by an actual price. It can be hard to get a sense of a realistic price without with, you know, just saying trim this tree. It's you know, more details make you get a better quote as well. And what else was I thinking? I don't remember. I lost it, but generally yes.
And then Tori, I saw you as well.
Just a point of clarification. Has this work has already been done, Stephen?
Yes, it has.
It has. And you're looking perhaps to have a second opinion to review the outcome?
Well, there's two issues. We obviously can't unprune it. I mean, you can't go back.
Right.
And it's up to us to decide if, you know, if this company did a substandard job, you know, and that I'm not really coming to you all for, you know, for that, although, you know, if there is, you know, this master gardener examples, you know, that we could refer to, and obviously it affects our choice in the future. But it's yeah.
Okay, so that clarifies. I mean, I just want to say, since we are offering names of companies, Barrett and Bartlett are sort of like, you know, they're the big ones. So I just have to, you know, lift up Baker Trees are one of my favorite companies to work with. They are a brother and sister operation out of Winchester. They're very conscientious. If you want to keep the wood chips, they'll give you the wood chips. They use reclaimed wood. They know all about soil. Baker is, Sean Baker mostly does, he's actually in the trees. It's a very community oriented person, and we might be, you know, going on a slippery slope, but since we mentioned Barrett and Bartlett, I'm going to put Sean Baker.
Tori, he mentioned
yeah.
Barrett and Bartlett because that's who he got quotes from. So I think we should refrain from recommending other specific companies. That was what Stephen had gotten quotes from them. It's a little bit different than us recommending specific companies.
Yeah, agreed.
So I won't put it in the chat.
I will say that most of us are pretty easy to find in terms of email addresses and Twitter accounts and stuff. And I think as individuals, we can share more than we can as committee members.
Well, the detailed description of the statement of work was one of the reasons for us going with Bartlett. And so perhaps I could share that maybe through the chair following the meeting, and you know, any comments would be.
Okay, yeah, I think in the interest of time, rather than doing a deep dive on that here, I'm happy to share it out to the committee members. And then if folks want to come back through and have conversations, and yeah, we'll see where it goes in the spring. I agree, it's always a little shocking to see how much gets taken out by a vigorous pruning. And it is also surprising how durable trees can be if they're pruned well. So we'll just see where it goes.
Well, thank you all very much for your time and your comments on this.
Yeah, thank you for coming. And then were there particular things, Anne, that you wanted to raise up about the Cobble Hill Green Space and the 90 Washington project? I guess to the committee. Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Here I am. I just wanted to say that Cobble Hill tenants are gradually coming together, and that has changed a lot of the process. I think we are surmounting the extensive language barriers that we have at Cobble Hill and gradually coming to understand what people want to do as they understand that some of the green space is now owned by the city. So there's considerable interest in, there's still great interest in preserving the existing green space, but also gradual understanding that the city now owns it and that there are going to be changes. So that's where we're working right now. If you had any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
And forgive my flaky memory, but I cannot remember if you attended prior committee meetings, but this committee, did you?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so this committee did actually put a memo of advice to the city, both the mayor and the city council, recommending strongly that the evergreens between the two properties be maintained because they are environmentally critical. They're an unusual resource, and it's an economic justice neighborhood. We are completely in agreement that those should be preserved. I'm not sure where else that has gone. I haven't seen much update on the 90 Washington site in the last 6 months, honestly.
It's still, it's now encircled by the old, the former shopping mall area is now encircled by a fence, and for the winter and possibly the summer will be used by the DPW with some public access to certain places within it. So it's 90 Washington Street is very separate from Cobble Hill.
Mm.
And it looks, we are grateful for that memo that was submitted. We're very grateful for it. And some people are mildly confident that it's going to be preserved, but we need to be very watchful because the original design divided up what the city owns into 3 areas that would have indeed decimated the park areas, particularly around 84 Washington Street, which is closest to 90 Washington Street. How the land is divided is still unclear, but that's part of a long-term city planning process. And apparently there are going to be representatives from Cobble Hill and the surrounding neighborhood to advise about what's going to happen.
Well, that sounds like progress.
Yeah, it is.
Do we know committee members? Like I say, I haven't been terribly connected to this. Has there been any other activity that would be useful to share beyond what's already out here?
The interviews for the committee are tonight.
Ah.
That's why I'm leaving at 5:30. Because we're people who are interested in joining the committee are being interviewed.
All right. Any other comment from this committee?
Just want to thank you, Anne, for offering your service, and I hope you're chosen.
Thanks.
Yeah, same. Thank you very much. I also hope you're chosen. It'd be excellent.
All right. Thank you for keeping that front of mind for us, and I really appreciate the diligence and the attention.
Thank you.
It's important. It really is, just showing up for these specific places where we live.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right. Do we have other resident concerns before? And I'm cognizant of time because we don't, I think, have a Boynton Yards development update. Did it turn out that they couldn't make it? Okay.
If I could, I sort of have an update. So,
All right.
okay.
Before jumping in, any other resident concerns that anybody wants to lift up and have brief conversations about? Jennifer Clifford.
I don't have a concern, so I want to be sure that whoever, if anybody does, to please say so. I just wanted to say that I'm going to share in the chat a link that I thought people might find interesting. There was an interview yesterday, maybe 2 days ago, with Speak for the Trees on WCVB. And I just happened to see that in my email when I sat down for this meeting. And it just seemed like something this group would be interested in, and maybe our guests here today. So I'm going to pop that into the chat if you're interested in hearing what they have to say. And I just wanted to share that. So thanks for the time.
No, thank you. They're doing great work and they're getting a lot of regional attention. All right, let's move to Boynton Yards. Tori, you said you had some update.
Yeah, some updates. So DLJ is submitting, their plans for what's being called Boynton Yard South. And I believe you guys remember they came to this committee and they presented their plans. And you guys remember the Miyawaki forest that was in their plans? You remember that? So what happened was they then worked with the city's public space and urban forestry, and I guess the civic space types, there was too much, this blows my mind, but there was too much green space in the area, so they need to balance it with active uses. Again, blows my mind, but so one of the next steps that's happening, JT has been asking, DLJ to represent their neighborhood meeting before the permitting process starts because of the changes. And the Union Square Neighborhood Council, one of the next steps is to meet with the public space and urban forestry to talk about the changes in the plan. And if anyone on this committee wants to attend to talk about it, I support that. So it's just a bit confusing what happened. And when you have something, again, civic space is changing so drastically, it has been cause for concern.
Go ahead, Vanessa.
Thanks. I can give a little bit more background and context on the PSUF side of things. So I don't remember Boynton South coming to this committee. Maybe it was a long time ago and I'm mixing it, but that's neither here nor there with what I wanted to explain. So this submission is for a master plan project. It's in Boynton Yards, which is currently just about nothing. And so each master plan has to provide a civic space study that gives an overview of the civic space types in the area around the developing parcels. In Boynton Yards, there is nothing right now, so there needs to be things to make it an active space. They need to have things for residents, future residents to do. They need plazas, they need playgrounds, they need pocket parks, they need sports features, basketball, adult fitness, water features, dog parks. There needs to be everything because right now there is nothing. There are no civic space types in existence in the Boynton Yard South area. They also have to carve out spaces for Groundwork Somerville and all that stuff. So that sort of gives a little bit more context to the civic space study requirements. Their recommendations from PSUF also were to change the orientation of the civic spaces that were presented to create a network of open spaces instead of sort of a hodgepodge hidden parcels that make it look like they're private to the residential area. The guidance is to make them feel open and welcoming to the public, not only of the people who live there, but of anyone who wants to come visit. So the original design had this huge parcel that was a labyrinth, and that was where a Miyawaki forest was going to be. And it was a huge space for a labyrinth that, in PSEF's experience, labyrinths are not very active spaces. They're not very well utilized. And so, changing the structure of the open space network in this development area to be more active included, changing a labyrinth into a more active place. This also is a master plan process, so it guides future development, but there aren't specifics at a parcel by parcel level. So this master plan sets the stage for each parcel in that plan area to come to the planning board for specific approvals of what will be there. So the changes that were made don't preclude a Miyawaki forest from happening, just not taking up an entire civic space area in an area where everything is needed.
Could I ask, what's the extent of this development? Is it like beside the new 1 South Street? Does it include this big lot of cars here? How much space are we talking about? I apologize for not knowing that.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I don't know the answer to. I haven't actually reviewed the development master plan, so I don't know. I don't know if Tori,
If you
you've
shift
seen
to
it.
their website, if you just Google Point and Yard Somerville, there's a lot of large, possibly overwhelming renderings. But if you scroll down, there's a, oh yeah, right there. That might be kind of helpful.
Good Lord, this website. Okay, so it's the whole thing.
So that, yep, that's Boynton Yards North, I believe. Could you scroll up to, just scroll up to a little more, No, that's not what I'm seeing. It's basically everything, like the Nissenbaum property is the main property. Going down Columbia all the way to Ward and Horace Street. I don't know how many acres, 10 acres. So it's a very large, it's one of the largest parcels left in Somerville. And this is going to be a discussion because people have strong feelings about this. I mean, I don't think we have many labyrinths in the area to see how well they are used or not used. So there we are. So yeah, between South Street and Columbia. So basically what I'm saying is this is going to be a conversation, and the Union Square Neighborhood Council is taking lead on this to meet with planning to discuss it further. And again, I just offer, since we are the Urban Forestry Committee, those who might like to join, I would definitely include you, and probably having DLJ present again, either before or after they have submitted their plans. So for me, this is an ongoing conversation. I appreciate PSEF recommendations, and it's just one of those things, since we live in such a active community, to have it be reviewed. Thanks.
No, thank you. This is really good to have front of mind. Vanessa, do you happen to know off the top of your head, master plan, who would approve a master plan? Is that ZBA?
Oh gosh, I get very lost in planning world. I don't know. Zoning Board of Appeals. It's probably a planning board. I really don't know. I shouldn't say.
Okay.
Yep. So DLJ has had a first neighborhood meeting. Again, the request from members of the public and JT is to have a neighborhood meeting. So in the administrative process, there's usually the requirement is to have one first neighborhood meeting, and then the developers are allowed to submit a permit, and they submit it to the planning board to request approval. And then they go before the urban design committee. And sometimes if we ask, they can come before the urban forestry committee, though urban forestry committee is not required. And then they present to, of course, they're always having conversations with the city. And then there's a second neighborhood meeting. And then I believe then there's a public comment period. And then after that, they can get approval. So it's, so currently right now they have had in the administrative process, this is all legal and in the zoning, they have had their first neighborhood meeting. And the next step that they can do is to go to the planning board. Yet we have asked for a second pre-submittal neighborhood meeting to discuss the changes in the civic space. I hope that helps. It is good that the city does have this process ordained because it's recognition of our singular community and setting our examples of thorough community process. And I thank the city council for doing that, and Dan Bartman, who's our guru of zoning.
All right. So it sounds like the invitation is that DLJ is going to be having additional conversations, and members of this committee could attend those if we are interested. And I agree that especially if they're having conversations about like reducing the proposed green space, I would appreciate an update on where they settle out. And I can either get that here or through one of the many, many other meetings that are going on. But my attitude is more green space is almost impossible to find. And I'm looking at this huge open canvas that they had to work with and thinking, we get told so frequently that there's just no space for anything in the city, right? And so this is the time definitely to lay out some significant bits.
Just to clarify, I don't think they're reducing the amount of green space, just the type of green space, or maybe green space, maybe it's open space as defined in the zoning code. Maybe not, a space just for only plants, but people and plants.
Did we ever, I don't think that we ever came to a good definition that acknowledges that not all green space is open and not all open space is green. And that we kind of use the terms interchangeably, but like if you've got a green roof, that's basically useless to the public. Most of them are. And if you've got a Miyawaki forest, it's hard to walk around and walk a dog in it. Is that something that we could help the city or the zone? Is there any appetite at all to help the city or the zoning code or whatever to make that distinction? Because I feel like sometimes the details get lost in that. Seems like not tonight. Right. Other things about Boynton Yard. All right, returning us to the agenda. This brings us to updates from the city, which starts with tree removals. So I guess, Breck, that's you.
Yeah, so not too much in the way of updates since the last time we all met. My next contract that's both for pruning and removals just went out for bids today, so I'm hoping that we'll be starting up work again sometime in the next month or two, fingers crossed. But right now, nothing to add to the removals list.
All right, and you're still having to contract out, still no tree crew?
Yeah, I'm told we're getting close for what that's worth, but no concrete movement as far as I know.
All right. And then I guess we go to the permits and exceptions. I thought I saw some activity on Malik's spreadsheet.
Yes. I will take that. He has been working to update the spreadsheet. It doesn't look like it's totally updated, at least in terms of if the UFC has been informed or not. So at least in the permit applications, he has been working to add everything in here, I think. So it's probably getting pretty close to up to date. I do see on the exemptions sheet, there are only 2 that say UFC has not been informed. One doesn't have any information about it, 91 Highland Road. I believe that was a while ago, and was just 1 tree in the property. And then 86 Electric Avenue, 1 tree was proposed for removal. It must have been in bad condition because it had an arborist report. There have been some new additions to the 2022 permit applications list. I'm really not sure which of these we've talked about, but feel free to browse the list. We probably haven't talked about anything at least since November, so there are 2 in December listed. The permits are pending. They actually look like they're still being worked out here. There's lots of question marks, so don't know about that. Overall, we were looking at the list together, Malik and I, and there have been approximately the same number of permits applied for, at least this year as last year, maybe a handful less so far. But overall, we have had many fewer trees proposed for removal. So looks like bare bones. Some is like 90-ish trees this year, 141 last year. A lot of the applications this year, I believe, were from homeowners. So there was the residential exemptions. So we haven't had a lot of replacement tree needs or restitution amounts. So we haven't gotten nearly as much money this year as we did last year. It looks like almost $130,000 last year and only about $17,000 this year. This still, it's a little bit of a work in progress. Like still finishing up the updates here. But I think, I think this is probably good news. We're having fewer trees, at least fewer swaths of trees being proposed for removal. It's more like here and there, homeowners needing removal or needing or wanting removals for one reason or another. That's my really quick ad hoc summary of the process. Any questions? Chris, it looks like you're talking, but I can't hear you. Is it my problem? Me or everyone else?
No, that was all me.
Okay.
Thank you. We've got a tree preservation ordinance conversation on the agenda that will start to light up. So let's have a conversation there about potential changes. But I feel like we do have a couple years of data now on what works and how much effort things take. So, and I'm really grateful for this spreadsheet. I use it a bunch when people are concerned about a removal or even a proposed removal, to go ahead and say, oh yeah, that's invasive. Yeah, that one's dead, whatever. So back to agenda, then how goes fall planting? I've been seeing a lot of trees go in, but I'm not sure how many of those are ours in this context.
Probably all of them or most of them. So the plan was to plant 195 trees this fall to make up for a little bit smaller spring season that I was hoping. And we're almost done, if not fully done. I'm just gonna grab some more water real quick. I'm having a sec. Okay, that's better. Sorry about that. Yeah, so we're almost done. If hopefully, by tomorrow or so, we'll be fully done with 195 trees. I think Crystal noted in the chat that they're a little bit nervous about trees going in this late, but it is still okay. Trees are dormant at this stage anyways. A little bit earlier in the fall maybe gives them a little more time to get their roots situated in the ground, but the trees are dormant one way or the other. So we have planted in the past, basically as long as the ground's not frozen and we can dig, we have planted, and trees seem to generally do pretty good. So, and we do also have a 2-year warranty on these trees. So if for any reason they are not happy with the move at this stage, they will get replaced.
2-year warranty.
2-year, yeah.
Right.
Any other questions about tree planting?
I'll just say thank you and good work. Congratulations. Is that a new record for a season?
No, surprisingly, it feels like it, but last fall we planted 270.
Good Lord.
Yeah. So.
And was last fall the year that we went all the way into January, that we had like an early snow and then a warm stretch? I remember there was one where you struck in late in this season.
That was in 2020, so fall 2019, but we extended into January 2020. I was not here for that.
Okay, that's right.
I have just a quick question on that. Since maybe we've talked about this before, it just occurred to me, we have a 2-year warranty on trees. We do the health assessments on the newly planted trees that we put up for the Adopt a Tree program. Should we be, not that I'm really interested in creating more work for the committee, but should we be doing that for all trees that are still fall within that warranty?
I will always take help, but that is one of my job responsibilities to make sure that the trees are, warranted when necessary. I've been recruiting. Breck's helped with those assessments, and Malik. So between the 3 of us, we try to look at as many of the trees that are still under warranty as possible each season, and at the very least, the ones that are coming out of warranty, make sure those get checked and replaced before the warranty expires.
Thanks. You probably have told me that before, and I just don't remember.
I don't know.
Thank you.
Sure. I do see a quick question from Crystal about watering them. They don't really need much water now. The contractor's supposedly watering them regularly, but if you may or may not see it, and they may or may not actually do it, but the ground's frozen and it's been wet enough anyways that the ground's pretty wet. So it's wet enough right now that they don't really need any extra care. The most important thing will be when it starts getting warm after the winter to give a nice flush to the soil and get the salt out of there.
Gotcha. I only asked because I awoke to jackhammers and putting things in and whatnot, and then went down and was like, they've put it in, but there's no watering happening, and it has not been watered since. So
okay, this contractor does things in steps, so they might not. They should at least combine water it a little bit. Sometimes that's happening later, but I think they put your tree in a couple days ago, so I'll check with them to see if they're giving at least one water event, but it's going to rain a bunch tomorrow, so that should be enough.
Yeah, that I will say that one of the most common complaints that I hear is nobody's watering these trees. And my experience is that I work from home and I sit by a window and I only I do see the watering truck come around, but it happens pretty quick. And then the surface water does tend to dry out pretty quick in the summer. But anything we can do to if it is the case that where they're not getting watered, then I want to fix it. And if it's just that like the tree is still or the truck is stealthy and swift, I wish we had some way of reassuring people, because it's a very common complaint.
I think in the summer they're stealthy and swift and they should be watered, and I check regularly and they say they are, and I've definitely seen gator bags full. It's hard to know if there's like certain trees that they're missing somehow. I don't know how to know that for sure.
Yeah, it's hard to know. It's really hard to prove a negative, right? Tori, I see you.
Yeah. So I was just wondering if it can be, I don't know if it can be in this year or for this contract per se, but so I noticed that there's, you know, a single bag on a post. And what I'm worried is that the roots of the tree, they start to favor the space where it's being watered and potentially become imbalanced. Can we put on 2 gator bags, which is going to obviously double the time of their watering schedule? So again, it's going to cost more. Or can we ask them to switch the bags every time they water, so it's not just a single side being favored? Again, roots are going to really intensify on the single side, so that gives me a little worry when I see it, and I've just been meaning to ask about it.
Yeah, good question. My thought when we started it was that the water is slowly dripping out, and water likes to sort of equilibrate within the soil. So even though it comes out on one side, my thought was that the soil would get evenly watered through this slow drip. And you know, I still hope that that's the case, but Cambridge does do the double gator bag method, and they don't fill up, at least last I heard, they don't fill up both bags at once, but they switch which bag they're filling up every time. I don't really know how they keep track of that, but it's something I was actually going to ask. I have a regional tree people meeting tomorrow. I was going to ask Cambridge about that. So I've been thinking about that too, maybe just put 2 gator bags and switch it up into the contract for next year. Definitely too late for this current contract, but possibly we'll switch that going forward.
Well, thanks for asking that question. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I was throwing while we're in the weeds of gator bags, my observation is that those bags are super susceptible to small damage that makes the water just drain right on out of them. And particularly watching the ones on Beacon Street are the ones that I know best. And I suspect that many of those bags are just absolute colanders or sieves at this point, which would give people the impression that they're not being watered. And I have no idea what to do about that. But just as an observation, if a bag doesn't hold water, it's not doing a lot of good.
Well, it's less good. In the Beacon ones, they're going into a well, so I bet the water still mostly goes into the tree area, under the tree grate. But in other circumstances, that's definitely a problem. I have had people report that their gator bag is ripped, and then I can get my contractors to replace it. That is part of it. The bags on Beacon have been on the trees long enough. They need to come off anyways. I think the weather definitely does not help. The UV light and whatnot creates a crunchy bag that's easy to deteriorate. But yeah, if you do notice specific bags, feel free to let me know and I can ask my contractor to replace them in the spring, of course.
Cool. So as always, trees@somervillema.gov. Awesome. Anything else about fall planting? All right, like I say, congratulations. That's always a huge job.
Thank you. I don't have it on here, but we'd mentioned for updates of the city, the vacancies. I apologize. It's been a week and I haven't made any progress since the last update I gave you last week. We have applicants and good people I need to set up interviews with, the chairs and myself. I just have not had the brain power to focus on that, so I apologize, but it does need to move forward, and I will make it happen soon.
All right. Thank you for that.
Vanessa, thank you. Will you remind me of the positions that are, I believe there are 2 positions, there are a total of 3 that we're trying to fill. Will you remind me of the
Here.
breakdown
Sure.
of it?
Yeah, we have one one position with urban forestry expertise open, one youth membership open, and one general member with no specific requirement.
Thank you.
All right. So next on the agenda is the Quincy Street open space.
So for this space, what I wanted to do was to create questions for the horticulturalist. I think that's kind of one place where we fell on it. And I've started a document. I don't know if if it makes sense to take 10 minutes right now to go over some of the questions, or Chris, if you would prefer that we do that in SAP. I mean, it might not, it might take less than 15 minutes. But I
mean,
since we're sharing.
We had a nice solid catch up last week. I'm okay with going ahead and talking about questions we might ask the horticulturalist. Is that any objection to taking a look at the doc?
How shall I share this? Do you want me to share my screen?
I will make you presenter.
Okay.
And we will see if it works.
Okay. All right. I feel like I'm exposing myself here, but let's do it. Okay. So do you guys see you see all my open tabs, I'm sure. How do I don't care, whatever. So, oh goodness. I don't know how to make it full screen, but
it's fine for me. I have a lot of monitor.
Okay. Again, all my tabs doesn't matter. So, questions for the horticulturalist regarding Quincy Street Park. Basic ones like, what were the instructions given on how to maintain Quincy Street Park? I think a lot of these questions are probably going to be answered by PSAP. Another question that the one that I'm really concerned about is, how did the horticulturalist remove the extensive amount of vegetation at Quincy Street Park? So that entire park was covered with a lot of herbaceous plants, and like, again, I don't know how they removed the bouncing bet, because that is a back-breaking job. So I just would like a straightforward answer. I imagine herbicide was used, and I hope we can. I'm not going to chastise somebody about it, but I just want to understand what happened. You know, why was so much vegetation removed? You know, Vanessa, we sort of had a conversation about it. I think there was a homeowner who was maybe worried about the rats. I just want to understand where this, how this came to be that like 90% of the 80% of the vegetation was removed. So what is the plan for the revegetation of Quincy Street Park? You know, how can we do it more thoughtfully? Maybe it's a very different plant palette where we're looking at, you know, plants that are 2 to 3 feet. What are the parks in the purview of the horticulturalist? I think there were maybe 6 or 7. what are those instructions for the park? So, you know, we know that once a park is planted, landscapes evolve, plants fill in, and so what are the directives to just kind of keep the park static with the original plantings, or do we allow for that? I want to understand when the horticulturalist contract is up, and what are the qualifications do we ask? You know, do we make, is that person knowledgeable about invasive species? Are they able to recognize plants when they are seedlings? Are they able to recognize them in their basal stage? Or do they know the flowers? Do they know the seed heads? Like, is it a horticulturalist who's trained maybe in ornamental plants that are non-native versus like native plants? Like I want to understand this, the RFP that goes out. And is it possible, how do we allow for the natural evolution of a landscape area? And again, that will require knowledge on behalf of the horticulturalist or the DPW, or maybe we do some switch off of, I mean, I know friends groups can be helpful, but then they dissolve. So the point of this is just to, I guess, figure out how we are able to maintain our parks that are not just keeping them static or removing lots of vegetation kind of without being able to maintain our parks in a thoughtful way, I guess is sort of the kind of overview. So I just would invite comments from my colleagues, or refinement of the questions, or and so yeah, I open it up to.
Can I just ask, I don't remember ever getting a clear yes on the fact that it was our horticulturalist who went through and removed so much vegetation. Did we, is that, do we know that now?
I do have an update. I asked a piece of folks about this, which is what it's going to say. So I may not have all of the answers, but there's been a lot of like challenging situations at Quincy. The horticulturalist does not pull up any native seedlings. So if there were native plants that were removed, it was not done by the horticulturalist. The thing that they mostly, almost entirely, have pulled up are Norway maple seedlings. The problem has been some of the barrenness is because of the Norway maples themselves and you know, the shade they provide, but also the heavy amounts of seedlings that were there. There's also a lot of dogs there that are digging and stomping on things. So dogs and tiny plants do not mix well, and a dog stepping on a small plant means that plant is probably not going to make it. So that's had a lot of impact on the landscape there. They definitely don't use herbicides, so that's not there. There was also, I think I mentioned this last time, but they had installed some plants, I think it was a year or two ago maybe, but there was some vandalism at the park and people dug those up and took them. So that was not something that the city did or wanted to have happened, but it happened. That's my basic summary. I appreciate you putting this stuff in writing. My like general comment for this is it seems kind of a tacky kind of, and PSF really cares about the park too, and we have this horticulturalist contract to make the parks better, and we're not trying to remove native seedlings, and it seems like you think that we're hiring someone who doesn't have qualifications and doesn't know what they're doing, but maybe that's not the full story. So the people that we have in this contract do have good qualifications. They are doing good work. So maybe there's like a tone we can shift the questions to make them more curious and less attacky. That's just my general comment.
Yeah, I guess the question I would add here, and maybe it could be a shaping thing, would be what's different about Quincy Street? Like, because if it was really the case to like, I don't see a systemic, like the Quincy Street is unusual in what we're seeing, right? And I'm curious what the specific challenges are there. You listed off a few of them, you know, dogs, people. Do you know if they took the plants to take them or if they like dug them out to remove them?
I
Hard to
think
tell.
you mean the vandalism thing that I mentioned? Yeah, hard to tell. I remember like reading stories about people having plants taken out of their patios and stuff. So I don't know if people were just like on a plant stealing spree, or they didn't like plants, or they wanted them in their own patio. I have no idea. I don't know if we can really trace where they went after they left.
And then there are a lot of people, there's a thing going on in the city now where people are just desperate about the rat problem. And one of the things that people are doing is removing vegetation that's up close to any house or up close to any fence. My neighbors have gotten advice that that's something they can do. I don't know if it's terribly effective, but it's certainly a thing they can do. Do we know, is there any guidance coming in from the rat controlling part of the city on removing understory plants close to buildings or close to fences?
I don't think so.
Okay.
But not that I've heard.
That's another story that I hear, is that you remove the plants because of the rats. And it doesn't sound like, I know my neighbors did it. It doesn't sound like something the parks group would do. So what's the destination for these questions, and how do we move? Like, is there a private meeting that goes on? Do we have to get this to some next plateau of doneness? Like, I'm interested in kind of coming to a useful conclusion, learning what we can, and then not leaving it open forever, honestly. Like, Tori, where would you like to see this go?
That is a great question. I guess, you know, because I've observed that park for a long time, and it's never been the case where there's not been extensive amount of vegetation, regardless of the dogs, regardless of the Norway maples that seed in. You know, Amy Myrtle and I worked there, I think 4 years ago now, and had bags and bags of burdock and garlic mustard. And so there's never been a want for plants, either native or non-native. And so I think it's more than just dogs and Norway maple seedlings. And so I guess what my desire would be in terms of how we engage in our parks would be for the allowing of evolution of landscapes and being able to allow for plants to seed in, and being able to be aware of invasive plants, and and even understanding aggressive natives. I get that as well. So my desire would be, if we have a horticulturalist, not to be attacking, but for the directives of PSUF to our horticulturalist, would be to make sure that it's not about like, here are the original plans, make sure that it stays this way. Because in my investigation, I have an original plan of Quincy Street Park, and I've found like there are several ferns, ornamental ferns that were planted, and it's like the area is all clear save for these individual original ferns. So it's like, how did all this other vegetation disappear, but some of these original plantings are maintained? And so in a way, for me, there is a disappointment somewhere. Either someone killed all the plants but knew how to keep these original plantings. Like, so I guess it's more for peace up. Like, what are the directives? How do we allow for an evolution of a landscape? Are we keeping it static? Because from my observations, and again, this is more of the directives that are given to the horticulturalists. What are they? Like, I want to know that. And honestly, I don't think that is that is thoughtful directive to maintain a landscape that's static. So I guess this is a conversation I want to have with Louisa and Vanessa and whoever else is on those teams, and just to better understand it, and how do we fix it? So I guess it would be my ask is a conversation with those in charge of directing the horticulturalists. And it's not I mean, that's what I want to understand. And how did the vegetation disappear? I hope that helps. So we can close out this item.
I was told that Pemberton does not pull native seedlings. So if that's the case, if that's the directive, then it's not trying to create a static park. You know, that the PSF's goal is to remove invasives and make it not full of just Norway maples, but you know, an active landscape. So I think that the goals align with what you're saying. Somehow the park got changed, and you know, we may never know the full answer, but I understand your desire to sort of delve into that deeper and see if we can understand it so that it doesn't happen again if it was something, you know, intentional on our front. I think when we talked about this before, I'm the one who suggested, I believe, to, you know, write up some questions and I could go help get answers for them. So I don't know if now, if you'd rather have a person conversation, or since you've gone through the effort of writing these questions, if you want me to take these questions to Louisa and Courtney and try to get answers first, see if that's satisfactory, we can go that route. Yeah.
Hi, I wanted to make a comment. So I mean, I have had this process happen a lot, of having gardens and having them suddenly destroyed and trying to figure out what happened. And sometimes you figure it out, sometimes you don't. You know, definitely, it was definitely like Tori was saying, it was definitely a lot of work was put into removing those plants. So it doesn't sound like it's something the horticulturist did, but whoever did it put a lot of work into it, and chances are they'll want to come do it again if it wasn't the horticulturist, and if it's you know, a neighbor or something. So that is something to keep an eye on. And the other comment is in terms of these questions, even you know, a couple of years ago before we had this issue, I remember there have been issues with Quincy being mowed during the growing season rather than late in fall when it would be a better time. So if these questions do go forward to the horticulturist or somebody, I guess that would be one thing I'd like to add is what is the plan for when it will be mowed, and can it not be mowed during the growing season? Can it be mowed after seeds have had a chance to sow, you know, like late in the fall? Just because I know in the past that was an issue that we had, that even prior to this, that it was mowed right in the middle of the growing season. So that could be in there somewhere. That was my comment.
I guess I always try to treat things as systems, and we have questions like this frequently. And my question is always like, how do I tell what the plan was for a given spot? And then we can figure out, like, are we just not doing the plan, or did the person maintaining it not know the plan and decide to do something different? Like, it's been there've been a few places in the city where my favorite, of course, is the Beacon Street thing with the bump outs. Like they put in some ornamentals and then maintenance was hard and they kind of got all weedy. And there was a truck that came through and did different things to different bump outs. Some of them are bare dirt and some have replacement plants. And I just don't know what the plan is. Like and how I would engage with it is different depending on what the plan is. It sounds similarly like in what I see in Tori's document here is a really clear request for just like, what's the plan? Where are we going? And then it sounds like the horticulturalist is not pulling natives, like is not instructed to pull natives, or rather is instructed to not pull natives, right? And so then it's an implementation thing. Maybe we've got an overzealous neighbor, maybe we've got some really vigorously digging dogs, whatever. But I would tease it apart and say a nice clear statement of what the plan is for the space. And then with that, we could actually say, well, is it signage for the neighbors to say we're trying a thing here? Is it a dog fence? You know, it really does depend. But if we start from what the intent is for a space and work forward from there. So I guess that's my big question is, as we have this conversation, being able to get to a couple sentences about what the intent is for this space, and then we can figure out a good plan to implement that. Jennifer Clifford, I saw your hand.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, Chris, exactly what you're saying. And actually, and I want to thank Amy too for making her points, because it was Quincy Park that sort of motivated us to make those signs for no mowing and to leave the leaves and to have them put at Quincy Park because of this activity that had been taking place and seemed to have taken place rapidly. But I have a question, if you can recall what it looked like when this first happened, where the plants were gone and there was clear evidence of them being pulled. Had they died? And the reason I ask this is because I'm looking at Tree Keeper right now, and I'm looking at the trees that are in that area where there is all of that bare spot now, and they're all invasive maples. And there's some Norway maple and mostly sycamore maple and maybe one or two Norway maple and some sweet gums that may or may not all still exist now, because this is data probably at 4 years old. So one of the things about Norway maples is that there's some allelopathy that occurs when, some of the root exudates are really toxic to understory growing plants. Is it possible that something like that is going on? I think it's a long shot. I don't think that's maybe likely because of how dilute it would be in there. But would it be worth looking into seeing what kind of compatible plantings could happen with those particular tree species that are in that fairly small area? I'd like to, what do you all think of that? Is that something worth thinking about?
I mean, I would say from previous years, like the trees are kind of on one side of the park, and that area near the trees does have very little vegetation even in the past. But other areas that are further away from the trees, you did have a lot of vegetation and milkweed and asters and all those. And I don't think that would explain the dramatic change that happened so quickly, because it wouldn't be like the maple suddenly just took over that whole area. It would have happened more slowly.
Yeah, with the
There definitely are
seedlings
areas in
growing
the park, yeah, where there's very little vegetation because of those
right.
trees.
And just the comment about pulling the seedlings kind of just made me think about that. If there's a lot of seedlings growing around, but that, again, that shouldn't be enough. But I was wondering about the fate of the plants, so they were just gone, like disappeared.
Yeah, if I remember right from
my understanding of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So to answer, thanks everybody. Thanks for sticking with this topic. And to answer Vanessa's question, what I would like is to submit these questions to PSUF. But I also want, I feel there is a divide I feel like, we have, DPW and Urban Forestry Committee and the community, and then we have PSUF, and I want to fight the whole, like, the silos. And I want to be able to have more of a direct communication, um, as a resident, as a co-chair, as a person on the Urban Forestry Committee, just to be able to have more face-to-face conversations with city staff, because I think that could really be helpful in figuring out these questions and feeling more aligned in our goals. And just like when you're able to see someone face to face, it's like, even if there are frustrations, it's like, oh yeah, we're just humans in this together trying to figure it out. And so those are the steps that I would like to see. We can submit these questions and then get a meeting together, if it's via Zoom, or maybe we have it at Quincy Street Park and you're like, what happened? How do we fix it? And feel like I personally just want to be able to feel like we're more together on this and working in collaboration and working, just being in it together.
I want to
Oh,
echo that.
sorry.
Or
No,
just
sorry,
say,
Leah, you go ahead.
no worries. Yeah, just say I think that's a great idea. And thinking about it in a way of like we're here to help and work together. So I'd be curious to attend that meeting if possible. Just because this is an issue I'm really, thinking about every day in my work, and is something that, again, I don't think anyone's really cracked how to do sustainable maintenance. So I'd love to, if we can figure it out, that's awesome. But yeah, let's I think it's gonna be a long process, and I don't think there is any quick solution. So I think building bridges between these different departments and different ways of doing things historically is a place to start and figure out how we build that into our process, is like checking in with these other departments on a maybe semi-annual basis. I don't know what could be within our purview, but yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. Absolutely. Yeah, with all of that. And I'd like to add that I know that there was some discussion last time about maybe that residents that were around Quincy Park weren't, to take Quincy Park as a specific example, where I think, Leah and Tori, you're talking about some broader thing, which I'm absolutely in favor of. I think we can do better together, go further than operating in our little separate kind of microcosms. But if there were to be something at Quincy Park, perhaps inviting a couple of the neighbors. I think you mentioned last time that there was a neighbor who was sort of distressed, thinking that plants kind of shielded some activity that might have been happening in the park that they were unhappy with and uncomfortable with. And if maybe it would be worth discussing these concerns with them. Are the residents getting involved with Quincy Park in a way that might be contributing to what we're seeing there? I don't know if I'm not suggesting that's what's happening, but it seems like Quincy Park has a lot of these different concerns, and the residents are part of that. That residents have concerns about that park. Maybe that would be another way to understand people living on that street. What are they looking for? What are they seeing? What would they like to have there as part of that conversation?
Yeah, I'm always into bringing more voices into the conversation, especially if something's going on in a neighborhood. People are pretty smart, and people are pretty intentional, and they usually have some reason for putting in the effort that they do. All right, so it seems like,
sorry.
go ahead.
Yeah, just Tori, why don't you send me the questions when you finish tweaking them, and so I can have Elise and Courtney start thinking about answers, and then I'll work to set up a meeting with whoever can attend, either virtually or at the park, perhaps weather dependent. We can start there.
So, do you guys, let's see, you see the questions again? So I removed ones that felt like kind of accusatory. To Amy's point, like, you mentioned like when do cutbacks happen, and you sort of said like, doing it in late fall, but there's still a lot of like eggs on plants, and there's like, can we wait till late May to do cutbacks or not at all? Is that okay? Can we wait until May? Amy, I know you suggested.
That's fine by me. I just don't want, they're just not in the middle of the summer, but yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's not really a great time, like you said, there's always something living there, so I don't know. Not doing it
Yeah,
at all,
and
but that doesn't seem feasible, so, yeah.
I'm just adding, leaving the stubble, keeping the, let's say, keeping the cut vegetation on site. That's my general principle. Nothing leaves.
I think that
And you guys saw the ones that I crossed out. I don't know. I think that.
Yeah, I think we're doing two things at once here, and I think it would probably be a good idea to treat them as two separate things. I think one thing is what's the plan at Quincy Street? Basically your very specific questions here. What were the instructions? What's the plan for revegetation? Which parks are we talking about? And then that's a very specific kind of question. It's like, what's the plan? The second thing is some guidance around what the Urban Forestry Committee thinks would be best practice for understory and park maintenance. And I feel like that's it at least muddies the clarity of the question, because that's more of a statement. That's like, we think we know something about this, and we think we shouldn't do cutbacks at particular times, But I think probably the way to move forward here is, if there are questions that we have, let's ask the questions. And if there are statements and instructions about how we would prefer people do their job, we make that as like a separate thing.
Okay, so what I'm understanding is we keep things that are questions and neutral, like when we can, but things that are instructive, perhaps they go in a memo.
Yeah, like if we've got I've grown sensitive to questions that are actually instructions.
Gotcha. Yep.
And
Also, maybe they're already, sorry, but, waiting till you have an answer of what you're doing, then you'll know what you have recommendations on if they differ from what is already in the plan. You know what I mean?
Okay. So I guess my questions are, I guess there's like just, what are the instructions on how to maintain Quincy Street Park? What is the plan for revegetation? What are the parks in the purview of the horticulturalists? What are the instructions for those parks? And the rest of it, so that those are like the only questions. I'll highlight them in green. So there's like, okay, what is the plan? What are the parks in the purview? And we can send those questions, and then the other should I add, how can we support the community in respecting these spaces, or is that a more of an is that more of
I am curious about what kind of what, if any, outreach are we doing, and what are some gaps that the Peace Off team has identified. But Yeah, I think, like, do you need a hand with anything is the spirit of that question.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say if we want to go ahead and give like guidance for, and this is guidance that would apply not just to PSUF, but to parks and grounds and everybody, to say if it is possible to do safely and with the labor we have and everything else, here's our recommendations for maintaining understory plants. I think that would actually be a super useful statement, because it's not going to be different from park to park to park, right?
Yep, exactly. So, so the questions that I'm going to submit are in green, and I'm not going to submit anything else. Perhaps I'll put it in a memo form for us to discuss at the next meeting, or for SAP to discuss. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 questions. I think that that I guess I'm asking to move forward on that. And I don't know if I need to make a motion, but does that sound good to everybody? To submit the 5 questions in green, and then drafting sort of some recommendations.
Sounds good. I don't see any particular need to vote on anything here.
Does that sound good, guys?
Yeah.
Everybody?
All right. Thank you. That was
Okay,
actually,
I'm gonna stop sharing. That makes sense too. Here we go.
all right. Next up is pesticides at Maxwell's Green. I honestly don't remember what we were going to do with this.
Yeah, you know what I would like for this? Vanessa, is it possible to, who's the person to communicate there to understand? I guess the ask for me is, can we just ask them not to use pesticides? Because it is my understanding that this is a POPs space, which is very much needed in our city, that this is a publicly owned, what is POPs? Publicly owned private space, publicly owned. So basically,
right.
anyone in the city can use this space. It is a public space. And that our general, I hope, practice is that we don't use pesticides. And if we want it to be a space people can use, that we ask them to stop using their pesticides. So is that something PSUF would be able to do? Or would you like for the urban forestry to make this request, and who do we contact if that's, shall I put this in a memo?
Yeah, so
And,
I did, ready for some answers. I did confirm that it is a POP. Whether or not the city can say anything about whether or not these pesticides, we would need to check whatever their maintenance agreement and covenant with the city is. I have not done that, but in the absence of digging through legal documents, a letter from the UFC would be a-okay from the city's perspective. So I think that's probably the fastest way forward. Who to contact, I have zero idea. I don't know. Whoever then owns Maxwell's Green, I don't know.
If I could suggest, again, with the idea that this is a general ask motivated by a specific thing, I feel totally comfortable saying this is a request that we would make of any publicly owned, privately maintained, or privately owned the thing. We would make this request of any such space. And so I think we should definitely reach out to Maxwell's Green, because they're the ones who had pesticide flags on the lawn. But I would be very comfortable having this memo be to the city council, the mayor, and whoever's concerned to say that we think it's bad practice to use pesticides on these public spaces. And we would ask everybody to, when negotiating those future covenants and when maintaining land, to not use pesticides on public spaces because of all the reasons for that. Like, and then we could like send that when we find the contact at Maxwell's Green.
I also have a saved
I think that
email
makes sense.
draft from when we first talked about this, and I found a couple things that I think support our claim. So things like Maxwell's Green offers unparalleled luxury, eco-friendly lifestyle by offering smoke-free living, environmentally friendly amenities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, showing them their words and saying, we don't think that pesticides fit within your ideals. So in addition, we don't want them anyways, but good times. Anyways. Yeah, I think we should write a public space pesticide memo. Privately owned public space pesticide proclamation.
A lot of alliteration.
To the fifth, potentially.
And we could probably, once approved, we could get that on the website with some of the other memos, but maybe it wouldn't be bad to send it around if we could identify some of these spaces like Maxwell's Green.
So who wants, go ahead.
My next question, who would like to join me in this memo expedition? Leah, Chris, Jennifer, or anyone else?
I'll help you, Tori. If you draft something, I'll help you with a draft.
Okay, that's what I'll start the draft. I'll share the doc.
All right, great. That'll stay on the agenda and we'll bring a draft, and seems like it's a pretty straightforward thing. All right, so we have ongoing work updates. Would it be okay, would anybody object to me jumping ahead to the tree preservation ordinance in the spirit of brainstorming and figuring out what parts we want to talk about? Are there other big updates? Okay, so I will.
That's fine.
And I think that this can be pretty relatively quick because I was trying to figure out, so you should see a list of 5-ish topics that could potentially go in updates to the tree preservation ordinance. And this is the result of me thinking about it for about 15 minutes before the meeting. So this is not any kind of big, well thought out proposal. I like the
bigger, Chris. Could you make it bigger somehow? I can't read it.
Sure.
Make it fill more of the screen.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is that any better? So one concept, just to kind of throw them out, was other cities do have a concept of a heritage tree, which is a special designation that can apply to any size, any species, and it designates basically for special protection. This is a special tree for us somehow, and in my mind, that would be potentially ineligible for some of the permitted removals, and it would give it just basically special status. I don't have examples of really great language on that, nor do I have a really strong opinion about who would get to designate such trees. I think it is probably us blessed by the city council or potentially the administration. I guess pausing pausing there, does that seem like a useful place to go? Are there particular trees that we really wish we could protect? And I'm thinking specifically of the one that's up near Davis, the supposed largest tree in Somerville, that I think is also just on a single occupancy unit. So the owner occupant could just cut that down with no process, with just an exemption. And I would love to jam that specific possibility if there are these spectacular trees that could just be gone at the whim of an individual.
Yeah, I think saving our biggest trees is of the utmost importance. Almost can't really even stress how important I think that is. DCR has a heritage tree program. We could maybe draw on that to support our language, and maybe even if we can identify trees, maybe even get them on their heritage tree list, which could strengthen our argument for that, but also provide some context for why they're important. So I think this is a great idea. I'm not sure if that could be expanded, and maybe, this is a good place to start, but I'm already thinking in my mind, can that be expanded to like a rare species but healthy, like some sort of, do we have any American elms that have managed to resist Dutch elm disease? Or I don't think we do, but as an example, would there be ways that
milk grow
protect trees that are otherwise important and valuable to us?
I would wonder if there's a way in doing this. I don't know how other cities do it, but if there's a way to then incentivize the people who would then be responsible for maintaining and pruning them, so it doesn't become a battle where, well, you're forcing me to keep this tree and I have to pay for it and it's really expensive. And I know this is always an issue with the city.
Yeah.
Incentivizing
And
in
I've
some way,
brought that up. Yeah, you're right, Amy. And I've brought that up. I've asked a couple of times. JT Scott comes to mind. We had a conversation once, and Tori, I think you were there. And or maybe it was Ben, I'm not sure, but it's difficult because of the landlord situation, because there aren't a lot of owners. And I think that that's where the issue comes in. But maybe, if landlords could be incentivized, maybe we need to. I like where you're going with that. I like where your head's at there. And it's just, that how do we help people keep and maintain their significant trees, important trees, because it does get pricey. And how do we get them to care about that if they don't live there?
Yeah, I like the idea, and I am not a lawyer, nor do I pretend to be one ever. But when I've talked to lawyers about this, it's always like you can't just have the appearance of handing out goods and benefits from the city to particular property owners. But yeah, if we had a nice public process with good justification for that specific great big elm, that specific great big white oak, I feel like that might pass muster in terms of being a place where the city could support maintenance on a particularly large and valuable instance. Okay. I am curious, the owner occupant exemption is the big loophole in the tree preservation ordinance. It was included for political expediency 4 years ago. The city councilors said, it's not going to pass without this. This is what my residents say is necessary as a compromise. I'm curious from the committee I would love to give it another try and see if the new council, especially now that we have 3 or 4 years of experience with the process and we know how it works, there's no mystery to it. We're not like proposing something new and weird. See if there is the stomach to remove that exemption. I'm curious how that lands. Specifically, Vanessa, if that creates some unforeseen thing that I'm not thinking about here.
Yeah, I kind of wish that Malik was actually here for this conversation. Maybe we can do it again with him before we get into too many details, because he does run the TPO permit program, so would have more details. But the first thing that jumps out to me is, we've definitely had folks who own a house, but they're not rich. They've lived here for a long time. They might be elderly, like they can barely afford to remove a tree, but it's causing some issue. It's buckling their driveway and they have limited accessibility, or it's banging into their house and it doesn't qualify as a hazard exemption, but they get a waiver from paying or replanting. So I worry about blanket getting rid of this because it will hurt the little guy, or if there was, like Amy mentioned, a program to help people maintain trees, and we could actually give money for that as sort of an incentive not to remove a tree, then maybe we could explore an exemption, like getting rid of the exemption. But as is, it feels like a lot of sticks and no carrot.
Okay, yeah.
And how would that look? Would that have to be, I mean, would it have to be like an application form? And obviously we'll sort this out as we go through the process, but are you thinking like application forms and then a need-based, demonstrating need-based in order to get funds, like that sort of process that makes it a little more equitable, where we can, help people that need the help and,
Yeah,
have that be a more equitable situation for saving and maintaining trees.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I have no idea of the considerations here, but once Breck actually has a few employees, it could even be a non-monetary thing. I'm sure there's all kinds of considerations in having city staff do work on private property, but it wouldn't even have to be a grant program necessarily. Okay, so there's real issues there. We've talked about the youth membership, at least having an expedited process, potentially finding a way to have.
I do just want to I have to bring up, when we're talking about heritage trees, we cannot be protecting Norway maples. We cannot be protecting trees of heaven. So I'm gonna make that argument. I think this is gonna have a lot of discussion, lots of discussion.
So just to put your mind at ease, a heritage tree wouldn't include any invasive species. I think it's for native species.
That does,
and that's sort of the word heritage versus significant, I think, is.
Yeah, at least not invasive species. As long as it doesn't protect invasive species, I'm okay.
Okay.
And I guess it does say regardless of species here, but I think that probably it would be size or some sort of unique attribute, but not invasives.
Okay.
But it shouldn't be invasives.
I apologize if I gave you any impression that I was trying to slide protections for Allianthus in. I wouldn't do that. But it's a good call out that we're not going back on any of our commitments to native species here.
Right.
Then actually the one that I wanted to, I don't feel like we have space to really work through. We know we want to work on the youth membership process, and I don't have really, I would love solid ideas on that. Like how? Like,
well, the outreach has a working group that consists of Leah, Tori, myself, and Murphy, who are going to be working on that. We're looking for resident input also. Mm-hmm. And so we have yet to, we just talked about that last week, so haven't really followed up on that yet, but that is something that is a priority for outreach. And since, let's see, how many people does that make? That's, I gotta count on my fingers. It's been a long day. Leah, Tori, Amy, or Murphy, me. And so we have room for more people on that too, from the committee, if anybody else is interested in joining to work through that.
Okay, yeah, this will be an ongoing conversation, and I really appreciate the support on that. Question to Vanessa and Breck. We spend a lot of time in these meetings sort of gathering information from city departments that are not in the room. Does anybody, and I'm not pushing this idea, but would it make sense to have any other departments represented? Like, and you're welcome to think on that, but just as things that we sort of decided, it was the tree warden and it was the PSF representative as a first draft. If there are other folks, totally happy to consider bringing them in. It's one of the big values of this committee. And then just to because I know we're running up against time, I had the idea of adding some language to our mission because right now we're purely advisory. We advise the city on trees and other plantings, and we organize Arbor Day. We could consider giving our, suggesting to the city council that this committee have a mandate to convene conversations about the usage of some spaces, that we could step forward into that as a part of the job of the committee. I don't know where that goes exactly. I feel like it's something we kind of do anyway, organically.
But are you thinking something more formalized though, say once a year, twice a year? Because we kind of held these sorts of community meetings when we did the management plan.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and we also do table, like we have this outreach function, and mostly that would be as a way of being really clear that we are not just arbitrarily expanding our work as the committee, and which always puts us at risk of somebody coming in and saying, no, you're just supposed to advise on planting.
Doesn't the language of the ordinance specify outreach as one of the?
Doesn't.
I don't know if it's missions or goals or something the committee works on. I remember focusing on that when I was helping to draft it.
Yeah, we promote knowledge and awareness. We're supposed to have a website. We are actually supposed to develop and maintain a noteworthy tree program. It says right here in item 12-105-2C3.
I think the language says we can, not that we have to,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Oh, my favorite conversation in law. What does it mean, shall? Does it mean you have to or just you can?
I apologize. I have to log off because I have a meeting I have to run at 6:30. I don't know if that affects our quorum, but I'm going to have to go. I'm sorry.
All right.
Bye, Amy.
All right. Bye. See you all next month.
I think we're still at quorum, but I will go ahead. I am happy to share this document with anybody. I would love to iterate over the next couple of meetings to, if there's anything we agree on rather completely, to push that forward for next year's city council to potentially have them debate and maybe update the tree preservation ordinance. And of course, this doesn't block any of us or anybody from advocating with the council as an individual. But if there's something that is like screamingly correct from the committee, I would love to use the committee's weight to advise the council. So let me do this. I'm going to go back to the agenda, and we are at our 2-hour point. Are there other things from any of these ongoing work updates that are timely and we ought to talk about now that people prepared for? Did anybody not have a chance to review the November and the December minutes? Great timely work on the last week's minutes, by the way.
I did not have a chance to review them yet, but if other people did, I will trust you if you think they're good.
I think they're great. I would be comfortable approving both. Go ahead.
does it matter that the date is incorrect? Was it the 5th? It was the 8th, right? That's okay though, right? As long as it's reflected in the actual minutes from December 8th.
You mean the the title of the thing
on
is
the
wrong.
agenda. Yeah,
I
on
the
the
can
agenda.
fix that. I'll fix it.
Okay. All right, any objections to going ahead and approving these? All right, let's run a quick roll call vote and find out. So Breck Miller on the approval of November 17 and December 8 as corrected.
I approve.
Cool, I approve. Jennifer Clifford.
Approve.
Leah Grossman.
Approve.
Murphy.
Approve.
And Tori.
Approve.
By a whisker, we have 6 yes votes.
And me, and me, and me. I approve.
An even more spectacular majority. All right. Thanks, everybody. I think that's the time we have. Unless there's anything else, motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
In a second.
Second.
Seconded.
Right. Thank you, everybody. I think this is it for December, and I'll see you in the new year in 2023.
Yeah,
Very exciting.
Yes.
Thanks, everybody.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Good night,
Bye.
everybody.
Everyone.